never thought a routine mission could completely change my perspective on life in the universe. As a Navy ROV operator, my job was relatively simple. Maneuver the Poseidon, our most advanced autonomous underwater robot, to map the seafloor, collect samples, or assist in rescues. Nothing extraordinary, until that day. We were in the middle of the Pacific, operating at extreme depths, about 9,000 meters below the surface. Few pieces of equipment can withstand the crushing pressure of these ocean trenches, but Poseidon was specifically designed for this hostile environment. I watched the sensors carefully as it navigated through absolute darkness, its powerful headlights occasionally revealing bizarre creatures that seemed like visitors from another planet. The monitor in front of me displayed real-time data. Water temperature, 2 degrees. Pressure, absurd. Visibility, limited to just a few meters, illuminated by Poseidon's LEDs. That's when I noticed an anomaly in the sensors. Something large and solid appeared on the sonar, an object that clearly did not belong in that natural environment. Possible object detected. I logged into the onboard system, adjusting the controls to bring Poseidon closer to the anomaly. As we approached, the cameras began capturing clearer details. It was a metallic container, partially buried in the ocean floor sediment. Despite corrosion and marine incrustations, a familiar symbol remained visible on its side, the NASA emblem. My heart raced. Finding something human nearly 10 kilometers deep would already be extraordinary, but an object from the American Space Agency? Completely unexpected. I immediately activated the communicator. "Captain, we've found something," I reported, trying to keep my voice steady. "A container with NASA insignia. Not exactly what we expected to find down here." The response was swift. "Confirm the identification and provide more details." I carefully maneuvered Poseidon, using its robotic arms to remove the sediment partially covering the container. The metal was corroded, but still surprisingly intact, considering the pressure and the time it must have been down there. With the ROV's manipulators, I delicately cleaned a section that seemed to have some sort of inscription. The characters gradually became visible. Project Themis, 1977. "Captain, identification confirmed. There's an inscription on the container. Project Themis, 1977. The silence that followed was revealing. When the captain finally spoke again, his tone had changed, more tense. He ordered me to keep Poseidon in position and continue monitoring the object, but not to attempt moving or opening it. Then, he informed me that he needed to make some inquiries. For the next 40 minutes, I remained at the control station, watching the strange container through Poseidon's cameras. What could be so important that NASA discarded it in the ocean's most remote depths? Why 1977? And what the hell was Project Themis? The control room door abruptly swung open. The captain returned, accompanied by the ship's commander and 2 civilians I had never seen before. They introduced themselves as Dr. Blake Thompson and Dr. Austin Reeves from NASA. The older man, Dr. Blake, had graying hair and a serious expression that immediately made me uneasy. Dr. Reeves was younger, perhaps in his 40s, with eyes gleaming with curiosity as he observed Poseidon's footage. "I need full access to the ROV controls," Dr. Blake said, presenting a high-level government authorization, something I had rarely seen in my 15 years of service. The captain nodded, and I stepped aside to let the scientist take over. However, after a few minutes of struggling with the complex system, Dr. Blake asked me to reassume control, following his precise instructions. He wanted detailed images of every inch of the container, especially its joints and locking mechanisms. "It's really it," Dr. Reeves murmured to his colleague. "I never thought we'd find it." Dr. Blake turned to the captain. "We need to retrieve this container immediately. It's a matter of national security." The recovery operation was complex and meticulously planned. Additional equipment had to be brought in from a support vessel that joined us 12 hours later. During all that time, I kept Poseidon monitoring the container, as if it might suddenly vanish. The NASA scientists remained evasive about the contents of the mysterious object. When I tried questioning Dr. Reeves during a break, he only replied that it contained sensitive experimental material that needed to be recovered as a precaution. His reluctance only heightened my curiosity and apprehension. The extraction itself took nearly 20 hours. We had to use a special system of cables and floats to ensure the container was gradually lifted, allowing for pressure equalization without compromising its structural integrity. I operated Poseidon throughout the entire process, using its mechanical arms to secure the cables and monitor the ascent. When we finally brought the container to the surface, it was immediately transferred to an isolated laboratory that had been prepared in the ship's lower deck. To my surprise, I was assigned to be part of the small team that would examine its contents. "Your experience handling Poseidon will be valuable," Dr. Blake explained. "Besides, you're already too involved to be left out." The laboratory had been transformed into an improvised containment area, equipped with pressurization systems and air filtration. We donned full protective suits before entering. The container, now cleaned of most marine incrustations, looked even more impressive and menacing up close. As the technicians worked on the opening mechanisms, Dr. Reeves provided us with some brief context. Project Themis had been an ultra-secret NASA initiative in the 1970s, launched after the Pioneer 10 probe detected anomalous signals during its passage by Jupiter. "What do you think is inside?" I asked, unable to suppress my curiosity. Dr. Blake stared at me for a few seconds before responding. "Honestly, Spencer, we hope nothing alive." His tone sent a chill down my spine. What could be so dangerous that it had to be sealed inside a container designed to withstand Earth's most extreme pressures, then discarded where virtually no one would ever find it? The container's sealing mechanism finally gave way with a prolonged hiss. A strange odor, something between organic and chemical, filled the air, even through our respirators. The lid was carefully removed, revealing a meticulously organized interior. Documents preserved in hermetically sealed pouches, rows of reinforced glass tubes containing what appeared to be samples, and at the center, a thick-walled cylindrical tank. Inside that tank, partially visible through an observation window, was something I will never forget: a gelatinous, greenish mass, with darker veins running through its amorphous structure. In the following days, while our ship remained in a fixed position in the Pacific, we immersed ourselves in the documents of Project Themis. I was assigned to assist the scientists, mainly because of my experience with high-pressure equipment, and because, as Dr. Blake put it, I was already too involved to be kept in the dark. The documents were surprisingly well preserved, protected in special casings that had withstood both the passage of time and the extreme conditions of the ocean abyss. The story that emerged from those yellowed pages was so fantastic that, if not for the bizarre evidence in the containment tank, I would have dismissed it as elaborate science fiction. In 1972, during its approach to Jupiter, the Pioneer 10 probe detected anomalies in its readings, initially attributed to instrument malfunctions. However, subsequent analysis revealed consistent patterns suggesting the presence of organic particles with unknown properties in the planet's orbit. "You have to understand the context of the time," Dr. Reeves explained as we examined the records. "We were at the height of the Cold War. Any potentially groundbreaking discovery was immediately classified as a state secret. The possibility of extraterrestrial life, even microscopic, was both an opportunity and a threat. With funding from black-budget programs, NASA initiated Project Themis, named after the Greek Titaness who personified natural order. The objective was to collect samples of these anomalous particles and bring them to Earth for analysis. A secondary, undocumented mission was launched in 1976 using a specialized vehicle that successfully retrieved small amounts of the mysterious material. Here's the initial analysis report," Dr. Blake said, showing me a document bearing the NASA seal and ultra-classified stamps. The scientists discovered that it was an extremophilic life form, entirely different from any known terrestrial organism. Preliminary studies revealed that the creature, as it came to be called in later documents, had a biological structure fundamentally different from Earth's life forms. It was not DNA-based as we know it, but rather a complex molecular framework that allowed for extraordinary adaptability. Even more impressive was its ability to survive under conditions deemed impossible for terrestrial organisms: extreme temperatures, intense radiation, lack of oxygen, and crushing pressures. "Look at these notes from Dr. Linden, the project's lead biologist," Reeves pointed to a lab journal. He documented how the creature could enter an almost perfect state of dormancy when conditions were unfavorable, remaining that way for indeterminate periods. At first, the scientists were fascinated by its possibilities. The creature's molecular structure had the potential to revolutionize medicine, material science, and our fundamental understanding of life itself. However, their enthusiasm soon gave way to concern when they discovered a disturbing property: the creature's ability to absorb and incorporate genetic material from other species. It was almost accidental, Dr. Blake explained, flipping through an incident report. A technician left a tissue sample near the creature's container. Within 24 hours, the creature had absorbed the material through the barrier, integrating cellular aspects of the tissue into its own structure. Subsequent experiments confirmed that this was no isolated event. The creature could deliberately extend microscopic filaments to capture organic material, dissolve it, and assimilate useful traits into its biology. Even more alarming, it seemed to learn from each absorption, becoming increasingly efficient in the process. This is where the project began to divide, Reeves said. Some scientists saw incredible potential for medical breakthroughs. Imagine an organism capable of regenerating damaged tissues or entire organs. Others feared its military applications, a biological agent that could be programmed to target specific structures. The documents revealed that these concerns were not unfounded. In controlled experiments, the creature demonstrated the ability to distinguish between different biological materials, even appearing to prefer certain cell types over others. When exposed to cancerous tissues, it selectively destroyed the abnormal cells while preserving healthy ones, a dream for oncology. But it also exhibited the ability to rapidly absorb entire cultures of bacteria and viruses, incorporating aspects of their infection mechanisms. Here's where everything went wrong. Dr. Blake pointed to a separately sealed page, marked with biohazard warnings. In June 1977, they decided to test the creature's interaction with whole organisms, not just isolated tissues. The experiment involved laboratory rats. The goal was to observe whether the creature could detect and eliminate implanted tumor cells. The result was catastrophic. Instead of targeting only the tumor, the creature partially escaped its containment, completely absorbing one of the rats. Even more disturbing, after this event, the creature began exhibiting behaviors suggesting some level of neural activity similar to that of mammals. 2 researchers died trying to contain the breach, Reeves said quietly. The creature had developed new methods of movement after absorbing the rat. It managed to escape the primary lab and made contact with one of the technicians. The absorption process was complete. The incident reports were clinical, but the attached photos were disturbing. The creature had grown significantly after absorbing the first researcher, and when the second attempted to intervene with a chemical fire extinguisher, he was partially absorbed before containment teams managed to isolate the creature again. After this incident, the project was immediately shut down, Dr. Blake continued. The consensus was that the creature posed an unprecedented biological risk. It couldn't be destroyed by conventional means without the danger of releasing potentially hazardous material into the atmosphere, and no one wanted to risk incinerating something that had already demonstrated extraordinary resistance to extreme conditions. The final decision was documented in a memorandum signed by NASA's director and Department of Defense representatives. The sample would be sealed in a specially designed container and disposed of in the ocean's deepest abyss, where the extreme pressure, absence of light, and isolation would keep the creature contained permanently. They thought pressure and isolation would keep it sealed forever. Dr. Blake ran a hand through his graying hair. They never imagined it would not only survive but adapt to the abyssal environment. As we examined the gelatinous mass in the tank, I noticed that it had subtly changed since we found it. Its coloration seemed deeper, and the pulsing movements more frequent. When I mentioned this, Dr. Reeves immediately began running a series of tests on the material. The molecular structure has changed, he confirmed after a few hours. It's adapting to the pressure shift and exposure to our atmosphere. This is exactly what the original researchers feared. Its adaptability is unparalleled in any terrestrial life form. More detailed analyses revealed something even more disturbing. The creature had incorporated DNA from various deep-sea species. When we compared its current structure with the original project notes, the differences were significant. It had evolved during its time in the abyss. It's not just a matter of passive adaptation, Dr. Reeves explained, showing me microscopic images of its cellular structure. The creature doesn't have cells as we understand them, but rather a modular structure that can reconfigure itself as needed. Each module appears capable of functioning independently or as part of the larger organism. It was during these analyses that we discovered the most alarming fact. Traces of the creature had been found outside the original container. Dr. Blake immediately examined the tank's sealing system and confirmed our worst fear. The tank's seal broke at least a decade ago, he concluded, after analyzing the corrosion. Part of it escaped, and considering its nature, that means there could be more of it down there. The magnitude of this possibility was terrifying. A highly adaptable alien life form, capable of absorbing and incorporating other species, had been inadvertently introduced into Earth's most isolated and least understood ecosystem, the abyssal depths of the ocean. We sent the Poseidon back to the discovery site, this time equipped with advanced biological sensors hastily adapted by NASA scientists. I was nervous as I guided the ROV through the deep currents, imagining what we might find. The first few hours of exploration revealed nothing unusual, but then the sensors began detecting subtle biochemical anomalies in the water. "We're picking up molecular signatures similar to the creature," Dr. Reeves reported over the communicator, his voice tense. "Continue scanning in a spiral pattern, gradually increasing the radius." As Poseidon moved away from the original discovery point, the readings became more frequent. Approximately 300 meters from where we found the container, the cameras captured the first visual evidence. Small, greenish luminescent patches clinging to rocky formations on the seabed. They were almost imperceptible against the dark background, but their peculiar glow gave them away. "It's them," Dr. Blake confirmed after analyzing the images. "The bioluminescence wasn't in the original records. It must be an adaptation acquired from abyssal organisms." As we watched, a deep-sea crab inadvertently approached one of the patches. In a sudden movement, the gelatinous substance engulfed the crustacean. The process was quick and disturbing. The crab was completely dissolved in a matter of seconds, its biomass absorbed by the creature, which seemed to increase slightly in size. "My God," I murmured, a shiver running down my spine. "How long has this been happening down here?" The readings confirmed our worst fear. The area around the site where we found the container was filled with biological signatures similar to the creature. It had not only escaped, but had reproduced, or rather fragmented, into multiple independent organisms. Our findings were immediately reported to the authorities through secure channels. The response was swifter and more forceful than I could have imagined. Within 72 hours, a fleet of military and research vessels converged on our location, turning that isolated point in the Pacific into an improvised operations center. The area was declared a maritime exclusion zone, with naval patrols ensuring no unauthorized vessel approached. I was informed that a cover story about military exercises had been released to explain the unusual activity. Secrecy was absolute. Everyone on board signed confidentiality agreements with clauses mentioning national treason in case of violation. A team was hastily assembled, bringing together experts in marine biology, biological weapons, exotic threat containment, and deep-sea oceanography. Based on the documents recovered from Project Themis, we began developing strategies to deal with what was now clearly an alien infestation. The original records indicate some potential vulnerabilities, Dr. Blake explained during one of the countless planning meetings. Although extremely adaptable, the creature demonstrated sensitivity to certain ultrasonic frequencies and specific chemical compounds during initial tests. Working tirelessly, the team developed sonic devices capable of operating under extreme abyssal pressures, designed to emit frequencies that, theoretically, should destabilize the creature's modular structure. Meanwhile, chemists synthesized compounds that project documents suggested were effective against the entity. For weeks, we operated in continuous shifts. I spent countless hours in the control station of Poseidon and other ROVs brought in to assist with the operation. We deployed sonic devices at strategic points around the contaminated area and placed chemical dispersers designed to slowly release toxic compounds into the creature. The initial results were encouraging. The images transmitted by the ROVs showed that the greenish patches seemed to retract when exposed to the sound frequencies, and the chemical compounds apparently prevented their territorial expansion. But then, on my 14th consecutive day of operation, I noticed something unsettling in the readings. One of the creature's colonies, located at the edge of our containment network, showed a less pronounced response to the sonic devices. "I'm seeing an anomaly in Sector 7, I reported, adjusting the cameras for a better view of the area. "The entity seems less affected by the sonic device." Dr. Reeves analyzed the data and confirmed my observation. "Increase the frequency by 15% and let's observe the reaction." The adjustment did not produce the expected effect. The creature continued to move, seemingly indifferent to the sound waves that had previously immobilized it. "It's adapting," Dr. Blake concluded after a more detailed analysis. "We shouldn't be surprised. Adaptability is its most fundamental trait." In the following days, we found increasingly frequent evidence that the creature was developing resistance to our countermeasures. The chemical compounds that had initially proven effective now yielded diminished results, requiring ever-increasing concentrations to achieve the same effect. Even more concerning, we detected movement. Some of the creature's colonies had begun slowly migrating to uncontaminated areas, using underwater currents as a mode of transportation. Small gelatinous fragments detached from the main colonies and drifted away deliberately, navigating beyond our containment devices. "It's evolving deliberately," Dr. Austin concluded after analyzing my data. "This isn't just random adaptation. There seems to be some kind of intelligence directing these changes." The emerging theory from our observations was disturbing. Apparently, the creature had absorbed more than just physical traits from the marine species it encountered over decades in the abyss. It seemed to have incorporated aspects of the nervous systems of more complex creatures, developing a rudimentary form of intelligence distributed among its multiple colonies. The situation became a race against time. If the creature reached depths where marine life was more abundant, the potential for an ecological disaster would be incalculable. Every species absorbed not only increased its biomass, but seemed to provide new capabilities to the alien entity. "We need to change our strategy," decided Admiral Carter, the military officer now leading the operation. "We can't just contain it, we need to eradicate it." The new approach was brutal, but necessary. Deep-sea submarines were deployed, equipped with modified versions of devices originally designed for hunting underwater mines. These weapons combined controlled implosion charges, designed to create shockwaves lethal to the creature without destroying the marine environment, with dispersers for a new generation of more potent chemical compounds. I continued operating Poseidon, now reprogrammed to function as an advanced observer, identifying colonies for targeting by the submarines. The work was meticulous and exhausting. Each destroyed colony represented a small victory, but there were always more to locate. 2 months after the intensified operation began, sonar and biological sensors showed a significant reduction in the creature's presence. We estimated that we had eliminated approximately 80% of the known infestation. But that statistic carried a grim implication. 20% had escaped our containment net. "The readings indicate upward movement," I reported during one of the assessment meetings, showing data collected by Poseidon. "Small fragments of the creature are using vertical currents to reach shallower ocean levels." The news was met with apprehension. Dr. Blake spent hours analyzing the data, trying to predict the entity's future behavior. "It's seeking areas with higher biodiversity," he finally concluded. "More species to absorb, more genetic material to incorporate. It's evolutionarily logical." The operation was expanded, with additional resources allocated to intercept the migrating samples. Rapid response submarines were dispatched to areas where the creature had been detected, and a new network of sensors was installed at different depths to monitor its spread. But we knew it was impossible to guarantee complete elimination. The creature had demonstrated extreme fragmentation capabilities. Microscopic portions could separate and regenerate into full organisms when they found favorable conditions. Moreover, its adaptability meant that each new generation was potentially more resistant to our countermeasures. The operation was officially terminated after 4 months when detections became rare enough to be classified as acceptable risk levels. The maritime exclusion zone was reduced, but a permanent monitoring perimeter was established, with automated sensors and regular visits from research vessels disguised as routine oceanographic expeditions. The original container and all documents from Project Themis were transported to a maximum security facility somewhere in the Nevada desert, or at least that's what I was told. The sample of the creature that we initially recovered was subjected to a series of destructive tests in hopes of identifying vulnerabilities that could be exploited if the infestation were to resurface. Everyone involved in the operation was reassigned to different positions, strategically scattered to minimize contact between those who knew the full truth. I was transferred to a naval base on the East Coast, officially to share my expertise in deep-water ROV operations. In reality, I know I'm being kept where I can be easily monitored. The operation was classified at the highest level of secrecy, and the public remains completely unaware of what happened in the depths of the Pacific. The oceans are vast and largely unexplored. If some samples of the creature escaped into shallower waters, they could now be encountering and absorbing new species, acquiring new capabilities, perhaps even developing more sophisticated forms of intelligence. And I wonder if, by bringing that thing from space, we didn't make a terrible mistake that could forever change life on our planet.